Hey everybody, what's up and welcome back to the Starcraft 2 Own It Shack. It is David here with you once again, of course, and today I'm going to be bringing you a Protoss tutorial, and this tutorial is going to focus on our Protoss player, of course, LiquidHuk, who's going to be going for a 3-gate expansion against his Zerg opponent here on the map Metalopolis. For those of you who are wondering, our Zerg player is TSL Curious, and no, I don't actually know how to read that right there, but you'll see in the text here that it becomes quite obvious that that is indeed who Huk is playing. Now, I'm going to actually just go into Huk's vision here, I think, simply because I think it's a good idea to learn just from the perspective of one player so you can see exactly what they're seeing. Now, I don't think I'll stick with this player cam for too long, though. However, I do just want to see, just so you can see on the minimap and such. Anyways, the 3-gate expansion, it's basically a build where you go for 3 gateways and you primarily pump out sentries, and then you go ahead and throw down a nexus, and the sentries can be used to repel any speedlings your opponent might, throw at you, because with a few zealots mixed in there, force fields will rip sentries apart. And that's primarily what we're going to be seeing here from Huk. So it's awesome. It's an awesome build, to be honest. It's probably the most standard thing you can do in Protoss versus Zerg at the moment, and the reason for that is because it can defend almost anything, really. You will have to, of course, as always, watch out for roach busts, all these typical cheeses, but with this wall here, which we can see is already in progress, going to be putting a cybernetics core down there, of course, and getting a zealot, you should be pretty safe for most early speedling builds. Now, as you can see, the probe is going to be poking around here just to try and prevent this drone from laying down an expansion. Now, we did see that there was gas already, so we know it's not a fast expand build. So that does mean that this probe is only going to be a minor nuisance. If we had actually seen no gas there, we would have wanted to probably put a pylon down there to just completely mess up the Zerg's build. And the probe will now be re-entering the Zerg's main just to check and see what's going on. Just so you know, in case you were wondering, Huk is actually known for his relentless harassment with that first probe. He will actually click on each mineral patch here to try and mine it, to make the drone or SCV or probe of his opponent have to switch to another patch. All these little things just add to the efficiency that Huk has developed, and you know what? He got into Code S, so something must be working. Really proud of him, by the way. So happy. I'm not really quite sure if he fully deserved it, because it seemed like there was some sloppy play going on, but I'm still happy nonetheless. Anyways, so now we see that the cybernetics core is finished, and we're going to want to get Warp Gate, of course. Chrono boost that out, as always. Got to get that upgrade. Probably the best upgrade in the entire game. Absolutely. It's so powerful, and I'm sure most of you already know that. But as you can see, so far, everything is completely standard. These 2 gases came up at standard timings. There's nothing really weird going on. And at this point, right around 28 supplies when we drop the next 2 gateways. And as you can see, we're really going to need this extra gas to build the sentries, because of course the sentry does cost 100 gas, as you can see right there. Actually, you probably can't because of the overlay if I do decide to put that there, but yeah. So anyways, the probe should now be just chilling around here. You're going to want, of course, try and get somewhat of a wall going along this direction. That will prevent speedling run-bys into the mineral line here. Instead, they have to arc way around the long way, and that can be quite annoying for a Zerg to do. So I really do suggest doing what Huk is doing here. Sometimes you'll see a forge go up, followed by some other tech structures. I typically prefer to keep things like the Robo and Stargate way back in the main, though, just so they're not as vulnerable. It's not as devastating as... Sorry, it's not as devastating to lose a forge as a robotics facility pumping out Colossi or something like that. You really need those units. You know what, I'm just going to move my keyboard here, guys. It's getting kind of a little bit less than ergonomic, this cast. So, alright, that's much better. So much better. Okay, I was very uncomfortable for the first part of this cast, and I don't know if you actually picked that up. But anyways, you can see with these 4 sentries, Zerg is pretty much forced into just staying back. There's not really much he can do. And this is something Huk actually really likes to do. I've noticed this in his other games. He actually does some pushing out with these small amounts of units. If you're a safer player, I suggest staying at home so things like this don't happen. One Zergling slipping into your main gets a full scout off. Luckily, the Zealot was out in time there. And you really don't want to get scouted by the Zerg, because if they see what you're doing, especially later on in the game when you get other things like the Robo or Stargate, then you're going to be at a disadvantage. And in case you just noticed on the production tab there, Huk just finished hallucination. And the reason for that is because now he can hallucinate a Phoenix or two, which you see right here, and get a full scout off of the Zerg. And in fact, the synergy that this has with those sentries is unbelievably off the wall. Of course, getting all those sentries gives you a ton of energy for hallucination, so why not spend just 100 gas to get that upgrade? I think it's 100 gas anyways. I'm sorry, I don't have the actual numbers there. But anyways, it's relatively cheap and much faster to research now since that patch, so it's really great. Because now Huk has seen pretty much everything. And you'll notice one really critical thing he saw here was the Roach Warren. That's pretty important. There have been some, you know, less frequent, more rare, but still prevalent builds where Zerg players are actually going for Mutalisks against Protoss opponents much earlier in the game, and you need to be prepared for that with Stalkers, obviously. So it's great to get that scouting information. As we can see, he's even putting another Phoenix out on the map to get even more. Now, because he saw that Roach Warren, he is going to be going for the robotics facility, and that obviously it's going to be to get Immortals, because of course Immortals are extremely good against roaches, and we have our suspicions further confirmed with this hallucinated Phoenix right here. Unfortunately, Huk a little bit of miscontrol there and lost it, but nonetheless still great. Notice that we are getting a ton of gas as well, and when I say we, of course I mean Huk, because I can never compare to someone so beastly. So as you can see, an absolutely ridiculous amount of sentries are out now at this point in the game, and that's going to really help. Huk is even going to get really aggressive and take a third relatively soon here. The Zergling will spot that, of course, but you know, it's still a great idea to take that third, especially when all you see are some roaches and lings this late in the game. Means that your opponent is probably droning up pretty hard. Alright. So you'll notice the Immortal is almost out, and that's really going to give Huk a nice sense of security in this game, because obviously an Immortal, he'd tank a ton of hits and really take those Zerg units down pretty fast. One Stalker getting caught in the middle of the map there, probably not something you'd want to have happen. Now, this 3-gate build has other transitions as well, and these are things such as getting a ton of gateways and just massing up low-tier units and mixing in some High Templar later, along with some Immortal support, and that's generally what we see Huk do in these games. However, the other thing you can do is go for Colossi. Of course, you can get the robotics bay immediately after this facility and start getting those Colossi, and then you can even mix in Void Rays to get that overpowered mix and completely obliterate your opponent. So it's really strong, got a ton of options, and as you can see with the hallucinated Phoenix, Huk is never left in the dark here. He sees everything. He's going to see the Evo chamber, so he knows that Zerg is going to commit pretty heavily to ground. Sadly, the Phoenixes do die pretty quickly, though. And you'll even notice that Huk is getting a wall here. That's fantastic, in my opinion. This is going to prevent Zergling run-by, so Huk's army can be a little bit more out of position, and he has more leeway with that. And you'll notice he's getting a second robotics facility at this time as well. That's going to really allow him to macro hard, get those Immortals out, and transition into the Colossi in the late game. Now we're also up to a really large amount of gateways. You're going to want to prevent overlords from getting into your base, of course, but on a map this big like Metalopolis, it's pretty hard to do that. There's so many points that they can enter. One thing you're going to want to do that Huk has done here is place that pylon there. The main reason for this is because when you're turtling this hard, the Zerg is really tempted to go for Nidus Worms, and a Nidus Worm in your base can actually end the game when you're more vulnerable. Obviously Huk has a considerable amount of tech up now, but still. Now you'll notice these mutas kind of catch Huk by surprise, but with all the Stalkers he's made in advance, it's not going to matter. And look at this, the wall is beautifully slowing down these units, so Huk has a chance to get back there and defend with his main army. Meanwhile, the Stalkers are still trying to take care of the mutas. A lot of multitasking is going on in this high-level Korean game, so definitely pretty solid stuff right here. And you'll notice, these roaches could have just come in and wreaked havoc on that mineral line, maybe even sniped the Nexus. And with these buildings here, it really prevented that, so I have to hand it to Huk for his excellent building placement. Really solid play. One thing you might want to consider as well is getting some extra cannons here, but as we can see, Huk is quite pressed for minerals right now, so that's going to probably not be an option. Instead, he's going to elect to get them in the main. Probably a great idea. Now, you should also have some, yeah, there they go. They're going to go at the expansion as well. Obviously, your resource nodes come first, and tech structures and walls should come second in your list of priorities if you want to be good at this game. Notice he does have upgrades going. He's already got the +1 weapons for his ground, and you can see that right there. The Immortals dealing a sick amount of damage to units, and he's still scouting with Hallucinated Phoenix. This is all because of that early, hallucinate that he got with the synergy. Now you'll notice mutas are coming in while a bunch of roaches spotted by the observer try and do a two-pronged attack. And with the cannons, he's quite safe against these mutas. They're going to have to take quite a few hits to get in there. Of course, you don't want this kind of thing to happen, but because these sentries were made so early, look at all the force fields he can lay down, even hallucinating a Colossus there for the lulls. And the Immortals doing crazy damage, as you can see. This one has quite a few kills, 7 kills, probably all roaches. Now we're going up to 8. And with this unit combination, Immortal, Stalker, Sentry, you can deal crazy damage against pretty much anything but cracklings. And as you can see, our Zerg opponent is taking advantage of that and getting those Zerglings. So to deal with that, what you're going to want to do is get the Twilight Council, which we see is now going down right here. And that's going to be to upgrade Blink. Blink Stalkers with great micro can easily beat a ton of Zerglings, hands down. So that's basically the reasoning behind Huk's decisions. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry guys. I'm stumbling over words. It's been so long since I've done an actual cast instead of a first-person video, so please forgive me. Now we do notice that he's getting 2 Colossi all the time now. This is really smart because that's going to do very well versus those Zerglings that Huk has a good sense are coming. Of course, that kind of game sense is going to come with experience and a lot of games played, and it's not something you can really learn overnight. Also getting the extended thermal lance, and Blink is being pumped out here immediately after the Twilight Council finishes. So I have to say this build is really good. When I play Protoss I usually play Protoss in 4 versus 4s because I don't want to ruin my 1 versus 1 record with it, so I just get the general mechanics of Protoss that way. When I play, I usually do prefer this kind of play with, but instead of Colossi, I go for the High Templar tech instead. And it's quite accessible too, because we do have the Twilight Council. You could skip the robotics altogether and go straight for this, like a 6-gate push, and it's still very, very strong. So many really good examples of that in Huk's other games. And as we can see, the Observer is getting critical information here. He sees Banelings, he sees an Infestor, and that's so important because this is going to tell him where his opponent is at the tech tree right now. Of course, Banelings, what that means is that Huk is going to have to be careful against Bane Rain because dropping Banelings from Overlords can actually do really, really good damage versus your sentries, which are light units. And you have to protect those sentries at all costs because they're going to be what saves you against those mass Zerglings that we see. So altogether, I'd say Huk has a pretty much unbeatable army at this point. And if you survived Zerg's pressure this long to get maxed as Protoss, you pretty much have the game already because there's not much that the Zerg can do from here in the way of tech that's going to combat what you have. As we can see, Zerg is trying to get Corruptors right now, but with all of these Stalkers, even if the Corruptors take everything out here, the Stalkers will clean up the rest, and it might not be worth it. Also getting Gravatic Boosters, I believe that's the upgrade that increases Observer speed. I think that's something you should get actually. It's so important because Observers are slow, and in the end you need a ton of them all around the map, and it's just going to help them get there that much faster. Plus there's not much else that you can do at shoot, does that come out of the... I thought that came out of the Cybernetics core, but I'm sorry if I'm wrong there. It's that or the Fleet Beacon. I think it's the core though. I'm really do apologize. Obviously Protoss not my main race. And we can see here the battle's coming. Obviously stay clear of the Overlords because you know what's coming out of them. It's the Banelings. Also, Huk is hallucinating a bunch of Colossi to soak up hits from his Zerg opponent. We see no Overseer here with this group, so that's going to make that hallucinate ability even more powerful than it already is. As you can see, these Colossi soaking tons of hits while the real ones deal damage from the back with extended thermal lance, blinking out of the way of those Banelings and the Roaches, and just dealing insane damage against his opponent. That is basically the name of Huk's game right now. And the best thing about this build right here is that you are protected from what comes next in the obvious transition from what Zerg has. We saw a bunch of Corruptors, which means a greater Spire should be coming, and we see that on here. So Broodlords are going to come into play. Broodlords not too good against this many Stalkers, so it's really, really nice. It has so many great transitions. I love this build that Huk's doing, and we can see just how powerful it is here. The Bane Rain, as you can see, does tons of damage, however, and that's quite devastating. All the sentries, as you can see, are completely wiped out at this point. Only one remains. But still, that costs a ton of resources for the Zerg, and we can see he's now overmade Corruptors, and that's going to make your Stalkers even more potent at this point. Of course, with Blink, they can escape things like a Zergling Surround here, that we're going to see that in just a second, and there you go. So your units are very cost efficient with this mix, and they deal damage extremely fast with Colossus support, so really, really nice. Huk is also getting more Immortals now, and basically that's because he sees that there's no chance of Hydras in this game at this point. He could tech switch into it, but the chances are not so likely because of all the Colossi the Zerg saw, so Huk's going to take advantage of that and get more Immortals to deal with any Ultralisks, which is Stalker army is quite weak against, as well as any Mass Roaches, which the Zerg has been doing for quite a while now. Mass Stalker, Mass Immortal can actually devastate the Zerg. With a couple Zealots in front, of course, to deal with Zerglings, I think that this unit combination is really powerful. The only thing that might trump it is, of course, adding in the High Templar, or maybe that Colossus, Void Ray, and Gateway unit mix that we see so much of these days. Of course, there are other expansions coming down here. This is the very, very late game, as we can see by the timer, and that's quite important to note. Now, you'll notice these two Overlords here just checking things out. Sometimes what Zerg will do is they'll send a bunch of Overlords at one of your bases to try and fake a drop so that they can come in with your main army and kill you. With this Observer following, though, with his speed boost that we can see there, the Gravatic boosters, that's not going to be a problem. Do note, we do see Broodlords now, and because of that, we see Khaderan Amulet already on the way. Storm is already researched. High Templar are going to be pumped out to deal with these Broods. Of course, they're so slow that they can't really get out of the way fast enough. And you'll notice that even with all those Banelings, there's still enough to clean everything up here, pretty much, because there's just too many Stalkers, and the ability to warp in units as reinforcements in like 5 seconds flat with all of these gateways. Oh, he doesn't even have his gateways hotkey. That's peculiar. But yeah, anyways, with those gateways, you can remax your army almost immediately. Now, of course, Huk doesn't really have the economy for that at the moment, but with this new base coming up and a couple others fully mining, shouldn't be too much of an issue. Now, here's what I was talking about before. Notice the Dark Templar just to do some harassment. This kind of thing is what you need to be scared of. These are empty Overlords, I believe, and you'll notice... Oh, I'm so sorry, they're not empty. But anyways, regardless of whether they are or not, when you see this, you need to pull back almost immediately. We saw a bunch of Temps get sniped right there, and that's very expensive. Meanwhile, harassing with DTs, always a good idea. Going to scout that Ultralisk Cavern as well. And yeah, unburrowing right there might have been a not too wise a decision against all these Immortals and Stalkers. And more Observers are going to come out. At this point, Huk almost certainly has the game, and well, you might wonder why, because we see that he has lost a ton of units. The Zerg has lost so much more trying to deal with that. And we can see that with the Dark Templar. He doesn't have many mining bases left. All the harassment, all the scouting, it all basically contributes to an overall excellent game by Huk. And great use of that early 3-gate expand that we saw here. And that's basically what this tutorial is all about. More Infestors are coming up. I do question the Zerg's decision to get those Infestors, to be honest. They're great against Blink Stalkers, but, you know, Immortals versus armored units like Infestors doesn't go too well. They will get sniped quite easily. The Infestor Baneling, I do understand that. It really slows down the Stalkers so the Banelings can come and deal their damage. Mass Photon Cannons is pretty much the only way to deal with this kind of thing in the late game. This Baneling drops on the probe line. You'll notice Huk pulls his probes immediately. As you can see, these kinds of things are going to take a ton of micro, and you always have to be paying attention to the minimap here, or you're not going to catch this, and you'll lose a ton of economy all at once. We'll notice more Broodlords right here. Mass Stalker, Mass Immortal. Says no problem to that. The Immortals are especially great against the Banelings because they can tank a ton of hits from them, just like a siege tank can. Even better with those hardened shields, so it's pretty much ownage on all fronts here. And now that Huk is High Templar and he's transitioning to those really upper tier units, I don't think he should have a problem dealing with anything Zerg throws at him at this point. And we'll see this right here. Alright, here comes the pretty much accumulating moment in this game. A massive battle here. As you can see, Huk gets a great concave by blinking those Stalkers into the void right here. Going to be tanking all the hits from the Banelings, letting the sentries and the High Templar deal their damage from the back. Bunch of storms wiped out pretty much everything, and the Stalkers that are remaining can easily take out the Broods and pretty much force a GG here, as we'll see in quite a short amount of time. Now at this point, when you know you've just taken out a bunch of units, as any race, it's a good idea to push and just try and really punish them for wasting those upper tier units on your army. As we can see, Huk is already almost maxed out again. Going to be morphing Archons as well, taking advantage of those Templar when he can. And this is pretty much the death push right here. And this is what he's been waiting for all along, all because of that 3-gate expansion. So basically going to highlight the main points here during this battle. What you're going to want to do is, of course, wall off immediately, as you always should versus Zerg. And then after that, going to get out the extra 2 gateways, pump a bunch of sentries, expand on it, keep your lead, turtle up, get hallucinate, and scout your opponent and decide your unit composition from there. Huk scouted Roaches, so he went Immortals. Roach Hydra, you might want to go Colossus versus that. And of course, Colossus Void Ray pretty much owns everything that the Zerg could throw at you, so that's always a good idea too. But Huk, not being an abusive player, goes ahead and forces his Zerg opponent to call GG, and concluding the end of this tutorial. Quite a long one, I know, as we can see by the timer right there, but I really hope you learned something. I know I haven't been paying much attention to Zerg and Protoss lately because of all the first-person videos I've done, so I really wanted to just showcase some some Protoss strats for you guys out there who might not be too fond of watching Terran every single game. But anyways, once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again for another daily dose of ownage.